Dale Carnegie of How to Win Friends and Influence People versus radical candor from tech companies like Netflix. Which one is right? Today, we're going to have another episode of a series I've been doing for a couple years called Contradictory Advice. And basically, the series covers specific success advice from successful companies, people, books that seems to be conflicting at first glance. We try and discuss this, and I give my thoughts on what I think might be right or wrong, or the nuances of it, and trying to come to some discussion or conclusion. In this edition, we're going to be taking the famous classic book. It was written many decades ago, How to Win Friends and Influence People. One tip from the book versus the whole radical candor philosophy that has led to the success of companies like Netflix and other companies like Ray Dalio's Bridgewater Capital. So, what were we covering? Basically, approbation versus praise. Now, in How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a book that sold millions of copies, still is very often recommended by successful business people and people who are skilled in communication. It says in the book that you have to be lavish in your praise of a person. People don't praise enough and they criticize too much. And the book says, because people do that, do the opposite. Be very lavish in your praise and selective in your criticism. Now, another group of, another demographic that really brings this discussion to the forefront is the Asian American community. I actually wrote a few blog posts about this, and I rank number one for the search term Asian parents on Google right now. And, it brought a huge discussion in the comments on my blog about what's right and wrong. And one thing that was brought up in the discussion was that Asian immigrant parents often tend to criticize like crazy, and they don't praise at all. You could get straight A's, not a word from them. No prize, no reward. But if you get a B, if you get a C, they criticize like crazy. And a lot of the children felt like it was a horrible way of parenting. They felt it was very toxic. They didn't like it. They got resentful about it. They never felt appreciated. And this would seem to be a big strike against the radical candor approach, right? Because it seems like criticism isn't working. And it really sucks, and it's horrible. On the flip side, you could argue, well, it may suck, but Asian students are known for their good grades, so maybe it is working to an extent. Or is it a byproduct of all the other stuff that the Asian parents do in enforcing the system, like the work ethic and all the expectations of like the assignments and routines you have to do once you get home. You don't just play video games, you have to study, you do homework. It's all kind of lined up for you. And maybe if they praised as well, rather than criticize so much, they would do even better. So what's the answer here? I mean, you have How to Win Friends and Influence People, who's clearly saying, and they give all these examples in the book about how, people just really crumble when they're criticized all the time and they don't feel appreciated and they hate it. They divorce people because of it. And then they love it and they become loyal and enthusiastic to you when you praise them. And then you have the radical candor side, right? And they're saying, with Ray Dalio's book and the latest book I finished, No Rules, Rules by Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, they preach a culture of blatant honesty, where you're super honest with people and you tell them, hey, these are the things I didn't like. And you can even tell this to your boss. You're encouraged to tell this to your boss. And it's, this attitude of, don't get personally offended. This feedback, even if it's negative, is to help us grow, to really point out the flaws. And that radical candor really helped these organizations create this unique culture that really led to their success. It promoted innovation. It took out a lot of these flaws that in traditional corporate culture would not be mentioned, because no one wants to talk bad about their boss, even if it's true, because they'll get fired. But that doesn't help the boss improve. That doesn't help the team improve. And oftentimes in these cultures where everyone's too polite or nice, some of these flaws and issues get unnoticed for years or never get noticed, which leads to deficiencies in the company and misunderstandings. So you have these companies like Netflix and so forth who really preach this radical candor approach and how to like bring it out in the system in formal and informal feedback sessions. How do you actually like reconcile this? And before I give my answer, I want to give you like another story. I just finished David Rubenstein's book, he's a billionaire like fund manager from Washington D.C. / Baltimore, and he argues that well, not him, but he interviewed Indra Nooya, who was the CEO of Pepsi Cola, actually a very great company. They own Frito-Lay, which has Cheetos, sour cream and onion Lays, all these incredible brands. And she was asked about David in the book on leadership and principles. And the one thing she talked to immediately was her Asian upbringing. She said her parents rarely praised her, and when it did happen, she would really relish it. And her parents would train her to kind of speak and act like a prime minister or leader. And her mom especially would say, okay, what would a prime minister do here? And they would role play at the dinner table. And, when the one moment she did praise, it really perked her up and it really like encouraged her. So exactly, where's the right approach here? Should you praise sparingly? Should you praise in abundance like Dale Carnegie says? Or is this just like different paths to success and maybe one's right, one's wrong, or none of them are right? Honestly, here's my thoughts. I think you should still praise abundantly and criticize selectively. But it's dependent on the domain. I think you should do that more so for parenting, for family, for friendships, for influencing people. Basically what the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, mostly functions on. And I get it. A lot of people use that book for business as well. I mean, a lot of business people even recommend that book for business. But, I definitely think that criticism has a lot of good value in the business. But it has to be done in a polite and effective and a way that the culture understands. Netflix and these places, they've already established a culture and everyone understands, don't take this personally. This is about what you can do better, what you're doing wrong, what we can improve. And so that's been established. If you come into an organization that doesn't have that culture, you have to be more savvy about it, socially skilled to understand, okay, maybe I can't just tell this person, hey, you're doing really bad in these meetings, you're rambling too much and you're not letting us talk, or whatever it is. You can't just say that to their face, they may get offended. So you may have to stick to formal meetings or even rephrase how you say in a way where it's less tough on them by using phrases like, hey, it would be even better if next time et cetera, et cetera. As far as parenting goes and the whole Asian parenting thing, you might point to what I've said with Indra and you'd be like, okay, so it does work. Maybe the Asian parenting style, even though horrible and I don't like it, it does work well. Well, I would say, I personally believe that the Asian parents, they're not perfect beings. They've done very well in certain domains. They've helped their children hit a lot of middle management jobs, lawyers, doctors, engineers, programmers. But, that doesn't always mean they hit their potential in life. And, a lot of these people, they're just normal, everyday, commoners who immigrate to the country from another country. So they're not like all-knowing beings. They don't have the perfect parenting style. You have to accept that for what it is. And although they do a lot of stuff really well, I personally believe that they should still praise more and criticize a lot less. And by doing that, I think their children will see a lot more success. I've seen firsthand a lot of Asian peers who really let that cripple them. I knew one who was so crippled. I mean, he straight up told me that like his father would always be disappointed with him no matter what he achieved in life, which is just sad. So I definitely think that they need to shift that out. Sure, Indra kind of succeeded, but she talked just about the praise. She didn't mention how whether or not her parents criticized her like crazy, maybe, or if ever criticized her. There's all different types of Asian parents, so it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone behaves the same. So I definitely think the criticism doesn't mean you cut it off completely, because that feedback loop is important. But be smart about it. Don't drop the hammer. 10 criticisms per one praise. That's way too much. Even 5 to 1 is too much sometimes, especially for a growing child. And in companies, just do it like quarterly, do it weekly or bi-weekly. Those things with the right culture can really help, spread innovation and reduce those issues and errors in the team, in the company, and so forth. But even in the business, you should still be using certain levels of the Dale Carnegie thing, because it's just human nature. People don't like to be criticized. They take offense to it, even if it's right. Their ego gets involved, especially the people who don't understand the Netflix culture, or have a more small-minded perspective. They're going to get offended. They love praise. And to talk more about the nuance, even in Dale Carnegie's book, he emphasizes it has to be genuine. When you praise, if it's not genuine praise, it doesn't work. So keep that in mind too. You're not laying it on when that person doesn't deserve the praise. And so by doing that, what you can do is maybe even find a hybrid approach with kind of like Indra's parents, where, you keep the praise low, so that when it does happen, they really appreciate it. But then when it does happen and they deserve it and it's genuine, you really lay it on. You really let them know, you reward them, and so forth. Because people like to be appreciated. People like to be applauded. And that's how you do it. The feedback, criticism could be just another word for feedback. And with feedback, it sounds less harsh because you can phrase it less harsh. You can tell that person the same thing without rubbing them the wrong way if you're smart about your language. That doesn't mean you hide it. That doesn't mean you alter what your message is to an extent where it gets confused. It just means you say it in a way that's less antagonistic, that's going to hurt them less, and still get that end result of that improvement. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm not saying I'm completely right. It's just my thoughts on it. Maybe there's some discussion in the comments that could help, but hopefully you enjoyed this video.